Friends, in times of big troubles, Jesus told small stories. And I want to invite you to stay seated during the reading of these two stories. And I'd like for you to hear these stories and see, where do you find yourself in this story today? Who do you identify with most? Now, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. "Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost.' Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I have lost.' Just so, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." So did you discover who you most identify with in this story? Now, before you completely decide, I'm going to remind you of the characteristics of these different characters in the story. The crowds, of course, around Jesus included the devout and the curious, the faithful, the skeptics, the naysayers, and the bewildered. About covers all of us, huh? And the Pharisees. Now, really, they were not quite the severe legalists that we sometimes make them out to be. They were really part of the reform movement within the faith. They wanted to shift the religious power away from the priestly class. They were committed to making the ancient teachings of their faith relevant to their times. They were like the village leaders, while the priests were more the temple leaders. They wanted to live right. They wanted to do good work. They wanted to serve God in every aspect of their lives. Jesus ate in their homes. He studied with them in the synagogues. He prayed with them in the temple. It seems like Jesus hung out with them a lot. See, there's so many stories about Jesus and the Pharisees and their times together. They all knew the Torah, and they knew that God cared about those who were poor. Jesus didn't have to tell them that. The Pharisees were not the elite. Maybe they had so little power, though, under that Roman occupation, that they chose the one place they could feel some little bit of power. And where was that? In the religious community. So like a lot of us wanting to feel some power, they complained about who was more faithful than another. Oh, we don't usually use that language of saying who's more faithful, but we do have our own ways of grumbling.
Well,
Jesus must have loved the Pharisees very much. Why else do you think he spent so much time trying so hard to expand and enrich their understanding of the faith? They were appalled that Jesus hung out with tax collectors and even ate with them. But there were some really good reasons for that. The tax collectors, they were not the outcasts. They were not the richly unclean. They were collaborators with the Roman establishment. They were traitors, and they were taking from the most vulnerable and giving the tax money to Rome. They'd sold out and cashed in. They were co-opted by the system. Their livelihood threatened the welfare of the whole community. No wonder they were despised. The tax collectors were lumped together with the sinners, considered a lost cause, not even worth trying to have a relationship with them. And eating with them, well, that was a form of approval. You're known by the company you keep, you know. But the tax collectors must have liked Jesus' company. With Jesus, they knew that they didn't have to cover their standing in the community with any kind of religious masquerade. And the lost sheep, do you identify with them? Wandering off, looking for greener pastures? It wasn't a willful act for the sheep to get lost. They were simply unaware as they wandered away, looking for what they felt like they needed, until it was too late to get back to the herd. And the lost coin, it was not from their wrongdoing. The coin rolled away from another's carelessness. It was thrown by a mishap in life. It slipped through fingers or rolled into a corner, but not of its own doing. And the shepherd, 100 sheep. It's a huge herd. Some say the shepherd was foolhardy to go after the one wandering one, economically unwise, and he'd have to account for how he put all those other sheep in jeopardy to look for one. The woman, 10 coins, but she had 9 left. Pretty good amount. So where are you now? Changed your mind? Still the same. Lost. All of us in one way or another. If you're wondering who we've dismissed as a lost cause, then maybe we're seeing there is some Pharisee in us. Jesus was asked this question before about eating with the tax collectors and sinners. Remember, Levi, the tax collector, left his tax booth and became a follower of Jesus, one of his disciples. And when that happened, he threw a party and invited all of his tax collector friends. And Jesus answered to the Pharisee questioners at that time about his allegiance to the real cause. Jesus said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick." Jesus stated that his mission was to seek and to save the lost, and that particular verse came at the end of the story of Zacchaeus, who was who? The chief tax collector, who had a change of heart about his money and his priorities. Repented, scooped up by mercy. Why, that can do that to a person. Change your direction, help you go in a new way with different kind of values. Lost. It's a word that covers so much of our inner and outer landscape. Jesus' stories step into our lost causes and lost hopes. On this 15th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, we remember lost lives. We still mourn. That day we lost our illusion of security, something most of the suffering world had rarely, if ever, known at all. We found our vulnerability, something we shared with people worldwide, and they reached out to us, knowing what that feels like. During the days following 9/11, in New York City, there were posters with pictures of the missing people. They were plastered on telephone poles, on subway walls, in bus shelters, and the posters read, "Have you seen my daddy?" Or, "Missing from World Trade Center, 104th floor, help us please." And then flowers and candles and stuffed animals showed up in front of the pictures, those small altars to the lost people. We lost so many lives and found so much grief. And we also found the kindness and courage of strangers who helped each other, regardless of any labels we so freely place on each other. Those stories of extraordinary courage and caring are still being found. And we can rejoice again together that in such a hell, some heaven was also found. And now we wonder, with 15 years of war, countless more lives lost, with hatred rising, divisions multiplying, and fear winning, can we find that sense of interconnection, our common humanity, our common fears and fragility as human beings walking together on this planet? Can we find our compassion again? Will it still be always vengeance? We weave in and out of being lost and found, personally and communally. Some of us, almost 15 years ago, felt very lost when we found a people and we called ourselves a circle of mercy. Jesus keeps inviting us to a soul inventory to expand our hearts and the heart of this community. Years ago, I had a spiritual director who invited me to meditate on these two parables. She had me list my losses on one side, on a column on one side of a page, and then list my findings in the column on the other side of the page. And then when we gathered around her fire pit and we burned the list of my losses. I had a hard time coming up with a really long list of findings. I had a much longer list of losses. But then she asked me, "What's that in your hand?" "My findings." And with that short list, she looked at it and then she helped me along with some finding, blessing words. "Remember this," she said. "God is a good shepherd who searches for you even if you have wandered away, because you are so greatly loved. And God is a woman on her hands and knees, lamp in hand, swishing the dirt floor and stirring up dust until she finds you, one of her treasures. Loved, treasure, God's relentlessly searching for all of us and will not stop until we are all found, scooping us up in mercy. Jesus gives us these tiny stories in big times of being lost. In July, Ken and I went to Memphis for the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the founding of Prescott Memorial Baptist Church. It was almost 30 years ago that I made a rather dramatic entrance into the pastorate of that church. There was resistance that was popping up from all kinds of places all over that city and all over the country who were opposed to women pastors. It was a long time ago. But we were dismissed, disfellowshipped, and discounted. But the church was brave, and we carried forth on the wings of the Spirit. So the anniversary in July was a homecoming. And people came from near and far to celebrate the beautiful life and witness of that church. But it was also a sad time. The church is no more. The buildings that housed so much vibrant life was torn down. It is a parking lot. The church disbanded. So we honored a church that we lost to death. So I offered somewhat of a eulogy during that anniversary time. In the loss, what remained? I had resigned as their pastor 21 years ago. It was my choice to leave, not theirs. Sorrow surrounded all of us, and much bewilderment. At the time, I thought I was leaving the pastorate and the church forever. You see, I had become overwhelmed as a leader of a movement for women pastors, as a pastor of a church, and as a wife and mother and a daughter to my family. I lost my way in a wilderness of weariness. On my last day as their pastor, I was packing up files in my office, and I was certain that I couldn't leave, and I was convinced that I had to leave. I was confused. I was weary. I felt that I'd failed the church as their pastor. I felt that I'd failed myself and my family. I felt that I'd failed a whole movement for women pastors. I felt that I'd failed God. I was overcome with grief. And at that moment, a stranger arrived at my open door of my office and asked for 5 minutes of my time. Before I could answer, he walked in, sat down in a chair, and started talking. He said, "You know, I read in the newspaper that you were leaving. So I came to tell you that when you first came to town, I spoke out against you and the church. I thought you were wrong. I thought you were unbiblical. I thought you were all heretics. But I kept hearing about your ministries, that a couple times I'd come late and leave early in your worship services. I slipped into the back. And I have to tell you, I experienced the goodness of this church. I experienced God's Spirit here. So I came to ask for your forgiveness." Then he stood up, bowed his head, and asked if I'd give him a blessing. A blessing? On that day? On the day I was certain I had lost all my ability to offer blessing to anyone. I put my hand on his shoulder and offered one, nonetheless. Then I bowed my head and asked him for the same. I don't remember his name. I don't remember what blessing words emerged between us, but I can tell you that we were awash in tears. He left with the words, "Thank you, Pastor. God's peace to you." When I returned to the anniversary, I asked my congregation that I had so loved, "Please forgive me." I came to offer blessing to you, God's peace to you. And when she found it, she called together her friends and neighbors. "Rejoice with me, for I found the coin I had lost." One who was lost was found. On that day so long ago, 21 years ago, in a devastating time in a lost wilderness, there was blessing and rejoicing. Who was found? The stranger or me? I can tell you this. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. It is grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. God is still searching us in the lost places and finding us in the hands of mercy. God's party's already underway. So let's go and invite everybody in.